Hello and happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to today's session, Tapping the Power of Microsoft Azure Services from Datapipe for DR and Business Continuity. My name is Emma Meyer, and I will be moderating today's session. I want to take you through a couple of housekeeping items first before we get started. So, as you notice at the bottom of your screen, there are a couple widgets. So I'm going to take you through those. Right underneath the slides window is the Q&A box, and if you have a question during the presentation, feel free to type it in there. Go ahead and press submit. Your questions are only viewable to the presenters, and we will be taking questions throughout the program and also at the end of the program. You can also download today's deck as soon as the presentation is over, and you can grab that right from the handout icon, which is the little piece of paper. So go ahead, everybody, click that. You will see where you can view today's slides. Right next to that widget is the abstract, which is popped up on screen if you want a little bit more information about today's presentation. Also, if you want, you can rearrange all of your windows, you can resize them, and the little circle icon at the very left bottom of your screen will reset everything and snap back to your original position. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve Reynolds. Go ahead and get started. Take it away, Steve.
Thank you, Emma. Steve Reynolds here, as Emma mentioned, from Microsoft. And again, let me welcome everyone and thank you for taking time out in this time of year. We know it's exceptionally busy for all of us. And really appreciate you joining the briefing today. Hope you'll find it will give you some thoughtful materials and some perspective on, as Emma mentioned, Azure services and also, in particular, approaches to disaster recovery and business continuity that we're going to comment on. We're going to have about 45 minutes or so of actual speaking and leaving time for a couple of little interactions on the way. And also, please feel free, as Emma mentioned, to use the question window on the console if you have a question for myself or Todd Smith from Datapipe that you'd like us to speak to. We'll collect those and address them as we go. First, let me just give a brief introduction, speaking to a question that I myself have to ask myself more and more often these days. Who are we and what are we doing here? Steve Reynolds, I am your host from Microsoft. As I mentioned, I'm in the Microsoft US subsidiary, and in our partner cloud business group simply means our group works with selected partners from our ecosystem to support them in bringing forward new and innovative joint solutions from our partners using Microsoft products to our market, and in particular to businesses like you all who are here today. We, as you may know, we work with a selection of elite cloud solutions partners, of whom Datapipe is one. And these folks are really how products from Microsoft come to life for most companies. You really need, especially if you're moving into the cloud or considering a cloud transition from traditional applications and a traditional IT environment. If you're looking to leverage the cloud, you really want a cloud partner of ours, as Datapipe is, who is certified and who's really an expert in leveraging the latest cloud tools for this environment. So that's a little bit about myself and what our group does. Let me pause for a moment so that Todd, you can say a couple of words, and then we'll go into our content today. Todd?
Great, thanks, Steve. Appreciate the time and opportunity to be here. As noted, my name's Todd Smith from Datapipe. I'm a product manager here, and I focus on cloud products and services. Among those, managed services related to Azure, Office 365, and disaster recovery. My background, software development, cloud and infrastructure as a service, and I'll be talking a little bit about our disaster recovery solutions that we employ for customers and talk a little bit about how we're employing Azure in our disaster recovery offering.
Great, thanks, Todd. With that as background, I'm going to just quickly talk a little bit about our relationship. I mentioned Datapipe being a certified Microsoft partner. The solution we're focusing on today is actually one of the latest cloud solutions technologies that Microsoft is in the process of rolling out, as you heard Todd mention, around Azure services, quote unquote. And we'll explain about what these new tools are for leveraging the cloud. I would just have you know that we're aligned with Datapipe in a number of ways, and want to showcase today for your thinking a number of ways that you can take advantage of both Microsoft Azure, the cloud in general, and also Datapipe's expertise. What I would have you say or have you think about is this notion of having a really excellent and certified partner to help you string together the Microsoft solutions, light them up, make them work with other workloads and applications you may have in your environment. Perhaps you're keeping some very mission-critical things on premises, and you'd like to put some other things in the cloud. You really want an advisor partner who can understand the cloud, understand how you can leverage the latest tools, but also manage the whole thing in a kind of holistic way. So look for that kind of supplier or partner. And Datapipe is a great example of one, as you'll see as we go along today. But that is the best way to take advantage of the latest and best IT tools that we're rolling out today. So let me just tell you a bit about how we'll structure the rest of our time this hour. I'd like to share a few, not so much my pain, but we would like to talk about challenges that companies in our space and those of you on the webinar today tend to be experiencing from our research. I'd like to share a little bit of our own internal data and thinking about the market with you. As Emma mentioned at the top, please feel free to take this deck and leverage it, use it for reference or for other purposes you may have in your business life. We do want to share our own information, so I'll do that for a few minutes, and then I'd like to get into a little bit how you can leverage some of these tools for specific applications and solutions. In particular, what we call business continuity or disaster recovery, which means more than just responding to a disaster, by the way. It also means the ability to span your business, ability to replicate certain databases you may have and bring them into new environments, and really give yourself a way of expanding and managing using the cloud today. So business continuity and disaster recovery, a lot of people think of them in only one sense, but do think of them in the broad way. And Todd will relate in a few minutes. There's a number of aspects of this that you can take advantage of. Finally, there'll be an opportunity. I meant to mention this before. I think this was mentioned to you guys when you were invited today. As a thank you for coming out and taking time out of your day, we do have a gift card from us at Microsoft as a thank you. It's a $25 digital gift card, and that'll be mailed to you. We've captured your email addresses at the end of the webinar. So do look for that as well. It may be a domain, a Microsoft kind of gift domain. It might look slightly institutional, but do look for that. It'll be a link with your our gift card in it. I wanted to mention that before we got too much further. So as you can see here, we'll talk through the business continuity and DR. A couple of scenarios Todd will show, and please feel free to utilize the QA window as we go. So let's turn now to some of the statistics I promised. I just want to give you a sense of really how big is this cloud phenomena that you've heard about getting. You can see its the usage worldwide of different cloud software solutions as forecasted by one of the leading research groups that we depend on, IDC. You can see a 22% compound growth rate as you look out over the years. What does that mean in dollars? Over 100 billion. And notice that the share now of applications is, as you see, 1 out of 5, 20% of spending now is utilizing cloud platform, cloud solutions, and cloud technology. I think what I would want you to take away from this is that this is becoming a very well-established and accelerating set of tools. So think hard, as you may be attending today, think hard about how we can apply them for you and how they might best serve your own business. Now, what are some of those categories that other companies around us are how are they dividing this kind of spending? There's a number of categories. You can see on the slide, and I won't march us through every data point, but a lot of things have to do with moving applications that don't need to be held closely. And by that I mean standardized applications, mirroring, replication, archiving, even things like mail, as some of you may well know, it's well established. Things that you don't really need to have on this side of the firewall can be very efficiently replicated and managed in the cloud, off premises, and utilized in a way. Let's not forget that the major advantage of the cloud is that the old IT method that we're all used to was kind of like going to Costco. You bought a lot of things in bulk, especially in the Microsoft world, and you may have gotten a great price, but you might not live long enough to actually use all the things that you're buying. So the great transition that we're in now is more filling up your gas tank. You drive around a lot, you go different places, but you really are only paying as you need as you go. So from Costco to a gas tank is my analogy of the day. But what I'm trying to say is that this really opens up some flexibility for you if you're looking at a new hardware cycle or an upgrade cycle, or you're wondering how some of the latest releases of, say, Office can benefit you as a business, or how you can upgrade an application running in SQL. Think about considering how you can use this to really optimize for the number of users in a given workload, and how you can take things that are not mission critical, not closely held, and have them, if you will, managed by an expert and mirrored and replicated in the cloud via a good advisor and partner. And a few more data points on this. You can see some of the categories from another cut into that kind of spending. As we've just been speaking about, how can you, use the tremendous storage, backup, and security features of cloud, transforming your data center, making it lighter, unlocking data and insights that may be in your information today, but can't be necessarily processed by you or by your own IT staff. Looking at mobility and ways that you can better have your remote or travel-oriented employees be productive. All of these things are now possible in a much more, I would say, precise manner, because you can assign different users and different teams and different operational groups access to cloud and the cloud environment as needed. You don't have to buy everything for everybody. Now, I'd like to get into kind of sharing some struggles. We're going to have a quick poll just to break up the monotony of my voice for a little while. I want to share a data point, another data point from some of our research, which is, you can see here the big 83% number. Thinking about companies, especially in the mid-market, we're not really addressing ourselves here to sole proprietors on one end, nor truly massive, let's say, top 200, 500 companies in the United States, but all of the people who really innovate and drive the economy, who are in the middle. What do they tell us about how easily they can do some of these things we were just talking about? How easily can you enable your workers and workforce to be productive in mobile environments, or share information from your network back and forth, control versions, archive things that need to be indexed and accessible periodically. How easily can you do that? You can see 83% of the respondents in our research say they cannot easily do these things, share access and utilize content information, all the things that go around quickly accessing and retrieving documents and linking with each other to share those things. 83% is the pulse of today, saying that folks are not comfortable or cannot easily do that. If that resonates with you, and maybe that's not the highest pain point that you're confronting today, what I want to do is kind of just get a sense of things that you folks are also working at or are being challenged by. Here's a number of things that we've outlined from other research, also to share. Securing mission-critical data, compliance issues, restoring and recovering your operating environment, working across multiple devices, which a great many folks in the mid-market struggle with today, and finally, managing IT costs just overall. Emma, I was going to launch a quick poll now, and give us your feedback. Tell us which ones are kind of dominating your thoughts.
Sure. And since, go ahead, too, if you wanted to share your own, type it in the Q&A box. I'd be happy to read those out loud as well. But we'll give you a couple minutes. Choose your top challenge here out of the selection, or feel free to type your own in the Q&A, and I can read that out to Steve. All right, the results are coming in here. We have a couple more that still need to answer. All right, just a couple more seconds here. It looks like right now, securing and guarding mission-critical apps and client data is tied with compliance at the moment. So we'll see if there's a tiebreaker.
Someone must have a problem with multiple devices. That's what I bet on, Emma, but we'll see.
I know, we're up to 60%. All right, guys, get your answers in there, and I will push out the results. All right. So it looks like securing and guarding mission-critical apps and client data is our #1 challenge.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. I think that we know that that's a massive problem, and just going to go back for a second and speak to that. The problems, we often see all of these, so it doesn't come as a surprise that taking good care of my information and securing it is a top concern. We at Microsoft are really, last year, over $800 million was spent across cloud partners, and a good measure of that in the United States, a good measure of that was around that very application. So you are not alone. What I'd like to do for a couple of minutes is share some personal history, and I apologize, this slide seems to be scrunched a little bit. But just to take a minute and put some color on the issue of security and on replication, I hope you can see the kind of picture in the middle of this slide. famous picture after Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, which is where I live. And as you can see, you're looking from the south north into Manhattan. The tall tower there is a financial building in Battery Park City, and to the right is Brooklyn, and to the left is New Jersey. And the shadow area is 34th Street. You can see that on the day after the hurricane, everything below 34th Street down to the Battery and Wall Street was dark. There's a couple of data points there. October 2012, the storm hit, and $30 billion, more than $30 billion in New York State and New Jersey separately, so over $60 billion in physical damage and in lost productivity. Just an example of an obvious disaster scenario, as we mentioned, that business continuity includes more than just thinking about disaster recovery. But I can tell you from experience, as I happen to live in New York, I live somewhere around to the left of that tall building, over by the water. My apartment complex has 50 units, and within 20 minutes of the storm cresting, about 50 people had lost their homes. That is to say, everything in their apartment, they lived on the ground floors, and everything in their apartment, had been essentially ruined. They had about 4 or 5 feet of the Hudson River in their homes. And believe me, it takes about a year to restore your home, dealing with FEMA and job claims, insurance claims and so forth. Fortunately, I was not one of them, but I just wanted to share a little bit of color around what happens. In researching this event today, one of the statistics we came across is from FEMA and not just Hurricane Sandy, but other disasters that the government has responded to. If you are offline, that is without email, for more than a week, according to their statistics, your chances of recovering as a business ever are less than 50%. So offline for more than a week, less than 50% chance of recovery. In my own experience, there are lots of businesses, as you all know, in New York City, all the businesses are on the street level, most of the smaller ones. And where do you think they put their data backup and replication facilities and their servers? All in the basement, of course. So when this picture was taken, those servers were also bobbing around in 4 feet of the Hudson River, just like a lot of the folks in my apartment complex. So there were a lot of businesses that, as I walked around, that lost everything, never came back online. Saying all that not to draw a terrible picture, but really to say that in this day and age, there's no reason to have that exposure. You really don't have to be vulnerable in that kind of a way, both from a disaster perspective, but also from the point of view of being able to access data that's not really needed all the time, or for folks who are remote to be able to access data, or to replicate and bring an office online where you might need local data caches. All that stuff can be done today through Azure tools and cloud partners like Datapipe. So I'm going to give Todd you a minute to talk a little bit about how you guys approach continuity and disaster recovery. But I did want to say before we go, if I could, just note that one of the, I found this in thinking through the event today, look at some of the recommendations from a doctor who went through having his own health network knocked off line in the Sandy storm. As you can see, some bullet points that came out of his best practices after for his industry group. Store data in a remote location. Close your IT system if a disaster is impending, buy a generator, and draft a paper plan, which I would take to mean have a local copy, a backup local copy of everything that's mission critical available around your office network. So in investing in and deploying these kind of principles and making them real for folks like you, I want to give you the floor now, Todd, I've been talking generally about the size of the market, the way cloud and the latest cloud tools can be used, and trying to define for us a little bit about continuity and how you can think about disaster recovery. Todd, I hope that is a decent lead-in to some of the
it's great.
Insights you'd like to share with us. But let me turn the floor over to you to talk a little bit about your approaches to these kind of problems and how folks can evaluate this further.
Great, thanks, Steve. Yeah, your stories about data centers in the basement remind me of a former employer I worked with in a development capacity. It was years ago out of school, and we had just such a scenario. And for whatever reason, the owners of the business seemed to want to take the risk of that data center in the basement, and we all just cringed every time it rained, hoping it didn't flood our data center. So those are very real scenarios, and from Datapipe's perspective, we just feel like that those types of scenarios for customers are solvable, and a disaster recovery plan can be put into place that would match really almost any type of budget to ensure the investments you're making in your business or your organization would persist, and you don't have type of outage that Steve's talked about. So as a managed hosting provider, disaster recovery, it is a core competency of Datapipe, and we have geared our operations to provide enterprise-class disaster recovery solutions for our customers. To discuss disaster recovery, it starts with basic discussions regarding the customer's business and answering a few key questions, one of which is, what is the tolerance for an outage? So depending on what the system is and what the criticality of that solution might be, that will dictate the disaster recovery plan that's put into place. Two key metrics that are a part of these discussions are RTO and RPO. So some folks on the call may be very familiar with these terms, might be new to others. I like to think of RTO, which is the recovery time objective, as how fast the system needs to be back up and running. So if it's a mission critical type of application, that's probably going to be seconds. If it's email, like Steve said, you don't want that down for a week. That can seriously harm your business. So RTO is a measure of that, and our engagements are geared toward what the customer's requirements are around that. RPO is a similar related metric, recovery point objective. Both of these are generally measured in time. RPO is a little more complicated in terms of how you measure data loss and what's acceptable, but again, generally it's a time-related measure. In our discussions with customers, we've generally found that customers fall into three discrete groups, and I have those listed here: hot site, a warm site, and I've spelled warm wrong, warm, and cold site. So hot site, if you think about back to the metrics, what tolerance for risk is, this would be an immediate type of failover, immediate type of recovery. A warm site would be a near-time recovery, so think of instead of seconds, we're talking about minutes, possibly hours in that type of scenario. And a cold site is replicated infrastructure that may not even be in place at the time of the event. These would be non-critical types of systems that you would put in place and restore from backups, usually at an alternate location. Just a note that most all of our solutions that we put into place and we manage for customers, backup is a core component of what we do in terms of system management. So generally, when you think of disaster recovery, it's a step above backups, and you again are talking about trying to measure the amount of outage that can be tolerated. And for a hot site or a warm site, it requires replication to be put in place. So replication, it ensures that your RTO objectives can be met. Another key aspect of our operations is our global locations. So we have 21 of those throughout the globe. And we can put in plans into place that would ensure from Datapipe facility to Datapipe facility continuity of business. So, a DR solution across 2 Datapipe locations, from a customer facility onto to a Datapipe location, or even an alternate hosting provider. So if you want continuity plans to possibly span partners, we could put that into place. And we are now looking at, we're implementing solutions to ensure replication for public cloud. Now Azure, so we have kind of 2 different ways in which we use Azure. One is replicating to Azure. So, you have a dedicated solution, for example, and you want those servers replicated into Azure. That's one scenario. Another scenario would be you have infrastructure in Azure and replicating either maybe back off-premise or to another Azure location. That's one scenario that's on our roadmap. So the advantage of a hosting provider, as Steve has noted, especially one with managed services such as Datapipe, is several-fold. I'll outline a couple of those here. This provides you a single source of accountability, and you can leverage the strengths of Datapipe or the provider, and it serves as an extension of your own IT operations. The operational expertise might be of a provider such as Datapipe might be difficult for you to replicate. So you'll get operational experience that might be a challenge to replicate with a do-it-yourself type of effort. At Datapipe, our maxim for our process by which we design and manage solutions for customers is plan, build, and run. And our plan phase involves a customer solution that's designed with a customer's specific requirements in mind. So we meet with customers, understand their requirements, provide them with choices that will be able to meet those requirements. The build task falls on our engineering teams to implement the design solutions, and oftentimes, especially in a DR type of solution, that's going to span different operational teams. And finally, running or managed services of the developed solution. The managed tasks and support will fall across different operational teams, and this ensures the operation and the maintenance of the solution. All right, so I thought that we could run through some of the different components of a DR solution, and what I'm talking about is more of a hot site or warm site type of solution. So if we're talking about especially a web-based system, DNS management is a core component of that solution. So if you think about the URL cloud.abc.com and the ensuing infrastructure fails or is no longer available, the DNS management comes into play and directs traffic toward wherever the new site may reside. So in addition to that, for replication to occur from the primary to the secondary, you really need a secure interconnect networking solution, whether it's a site-to-site VPN or an any-to-any type of connection using MPLS. This will ensure the privacy as you're performing the replication to the secondary site. Firewalls would typically be a part of your solution, so ensuring that unwanted traffic doesn't come in, yet authorizing outward communication. Several different scenarios that you'd have to think through with your particular firewall implementation. What type of traffic is coming in and out in terms of the recovery location. Would you want to replicate the same rules, or would you want to have something different? If the configuration might change, how do you replicate those to the secondary alternate site? This can be a part of the planning process in and of itself. Load balancing might, would generally be put in place to ensure continuity of the primary system. Would you want the same load balancing for the secondary site as well? Last bullet point there. I think a lot of times when we talk about disaster recovery, this last bullet point is generally the focus, although all of these different components and even more might need to be considered for the entire solution. But oftentimes for the DR solution, you're thinking of how you replicate particular servers and or workloads from the primary site to a secondary site or a failover site, ensuring the consistency between those. And here, replication tools are typically employed, and we do as well at Datapipe. ASR, I'll note, is definitely one of those. And this just ensures that the replicated servers are mirrored in a way that's in accordance with the replication or the recovery objectives, so the RTO and the RPO that we mentioned. All right, so there's a couple of different components that might be a part of your DR plan. So I put this diagram together to help us visualize what this might look like. Again, this is a hot site type of scenario and representative of a dedicated solution. So for example, this might reside in a Datapipe data center or on a customer's site. So some of the different components, we talked about firewall and load balancing. In this example, there's a cluster of web servers or app servers. So if you want to think of this as the web tier, and then you'd have a data tier with a database cluster and possibly shared storage. So for a DR scenario such as this, you're trying to ensure that this entire scenario, this entire system is replicated, which is representative of our next slide here. So the secure connect that we were talking about, interconnect, you want to make sure that that's secure and private. Datapipe, we manage our own MPLS backbone, so we can ensure that the connection between these two facilities is managed properly and ensure that it's secure and private, and has the bandwidth required for the replication to be successful. So that's a key data point there. We see the global DNS here. So based on availability, this global DNS solution can it can fail over within seconds, depending on the type of solution that you have in place here. So if this is a hot site, all of this infrastructure is provisioned, it's standing and ready, and in the event of a disaster type of event, if the primary site is down, the global DNS system would note that and immediately fail over to the alternate site. So some of the server replication that happens here, again, this is a dedicated solution. So essentially all these components are going to be replicated toward to the failover. So the web tier, those servers replicated to comparable servers. Storage replication happens if this is at a SAN or shared storage type of solution. That same storage will be replicated, and then the database cluster would be replicated as well to a comparable solution at the failover site. So once you have this site up and going, or the DR scenario up and running, that's obviously a core piece of the puzzle. Some of the additional steps that are going to be put into place is to test the system. So you'd have periodic tests that you would conduct to ensure that in the event of emergency or an outage, your recovery plan could be executed. And you put into place some run books or a run book, a set of steps that would be executed to manage the failover. So those are some of the things that you put into place. You also might consider, if it's something that you're failing over to and you don't want that to be, your permanent solution, how you then restore back to the primary site. So this is the typical solution that Datapipe's put into place for customers over the years, still do today. So as we look to Azure, how this scenario changes a little bit, we're looking, we're making use of a new Azure service offering that's it's called Azure Site Recovery. And as I mentioned, at the server replication level, so you have these web servers and you're trying to replicate those based on the objectives. ASR is a tool that is the orchestration of that replication. So it allows this replication between the two web tiers to occur, and also has functionality that can allow you to replicate database clusters. Now, for a database cluster, you have to take some additional steps as to how exactly you're going to replicate that. And one of the great advantages to the solution from Microsoft that's available is being able to replicate to the cloud. So if you think of this scenario in which you have a primary site and a secondary site all with dedicated infrastructure, that's quite a bit of capital that would need to be employed. And if your solution is such that requires scaling, so here we have 3 web servers, let's say you have needed to scale that over time, and it's now 100 web servers. Having that type of solution at a failover site it gets hard to manage, and it could be quite costly. So some of the advantages of making use of Azure and ASR is the replication occurs up into the Azure cloud, so there's no infrastructure that needs to be provisioned, and the replication occurs essentially to storage. So you pay for the storage of the data that's required for that replication, and in the event of a disaster that requires a failover, that virtual infrastructure is essentially lit up in Azure upon the event. So the appropriate virtual machines would be provisioned. SQL Server, whether it's replicating to a VM or whatnot, the SQL database would be provisioned in Azure. As like I said, it could be a similar type of setup, just databases on VMs, or you can make use of the database as a service Azure SQL solution as well. Some of the different components of Azure Site Recovery, there's, or some of the different scenarios, of Azure Site Recovery that we support are, again, thinking of the primary site here, we're looking at if the web server tiers are in a VMware environment, we can replicate that to Azure, or if they're physical servers, that's another replication scenario that we support. Now, ASR supports a number of different scenarios. Actually, it can replicate, from on-premise to on-premise. And of course, Hyper-V is a key scenario that is supported by that product as well. So you essentially have physical servers, VMware, Hyper-V that are supported by Azure Site Recovery, and that replication can occur as indicated here from 2 dedicated sites or up into Azure. And like I said, the VMware to physical are the solutions that we support.
Todd, I had a quick question for you. This is Steve.
Sure.
For folks listening in, can you comment, or what would your thought be on the traditional path to say this kind of replication, the traditional configurations? How long would are there some time markers you folks have worked out that would let someone considering this consider it like formerly 18 hours or 2 work days and now XYZ? Any perspective on that?
So you're asking what is the typical path a customer takes to implement a DR scenario like this?
Well, no, more in the event that one had to use it to restore or recover. I just wondered if we could illustrate for folks what the newer cloud tools save, in terms of time.
Right. Well, in terms of time, the newer cloud tools, so if you're replicating into Azure, like I said, all of the infrastructure that you see here on this, at the failover site, for us, is not provisioned as a part of the DR scenario. Azure Site Recovery really manages that orchestration. It replicates the state of the servers into Azure storage, and in the event of an emergency or a failover event, it would be part of provisioning the infrastructure in a virtual fashion. The global DNS, Azure has a service called Traffic Manager that is something that you can employ to implement this global DNS type of scenario. And so as Traffic Manager would monitor the primary site and be directing traffic there, and Traffic Manager can be used just for general load balancing and things like that beyond DR. But in a DR scenario, it would then direct traffic if the availability of the primary site's down, Traffic Manager directs to the new site. And again, this is a solution that's put in place really without any hardware that's required on the part of the customer or even Datapipe. It just requires management. In terms of setting a solution up like this, DR implementations can be straightforward and pretty easy, small in scope, or they can be quite large. So it really does vary in terms of how long it would take. The DR plan itself could conceptually take weeks or even months to put together, depending on what the solution might be. So that might be a depends type of answer in terms of how long it would take to get this up and going. But it really varies. In terms of the path customers might take, it triggered a thought that might be of interest. I think 2 common scenarios are one is a customer has an existing system that's put in place that they're using, and they realize that we're backing this up, or we just really don't have appropriate coverage for the risk that we would incur in the event of some outage. So in that case, it's an existing, say production type of application, and they're trying to put a DR scenario, they're trying to put a DR solution in place for that. So they've kind of gravitated toward that. Maybe there could be various reasons why they don't have that solution in place from day one. Another solution that we see is customers that do have that in place from day one. So it would be a part of the DR scenario. The DR plan is really a part of the scoping and solution of the primary primary system that we're putting in place. That answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, sorry, Todd. Thank you. I think these perspectives are just interesting to consider, you know, as people are looking into this and so to speak, what can it do for me? I think these are, you know, your guys' perspective on this is kind of interesting for the thought process. So thank you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that was the slides that I had to cover.
Sure.
Shall we hand back to Emma?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Todd. And some next steps for everybody to keep in mind here. Remember, you can download today's slides with that page icon at the bottom of your screen. It is the third one from the right. And at the end, you'll be launched to an exit action. So everybody stick around to the end of the presentation. You'll be asked 2 quick questions. And also, as Steve mentioned earlier, make sure to watch your email for the gift card that you will be receiving shortly. And at this time, we'll take any questions. If you have any from, you know, the presentation today, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box. Todd and Steve, you did a wonderful job today.
Well, thank you, and Todd, thank you again on behalf of Microsoft for joining us and your colleagues at Datapipe. I think we will certainly offer a phase 2 of this, you know, come January.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. We're very excited about the Microsoft suite of products that we're able to employ for customers, and there's just tremendous opportunity for customers to leverage, you know, these tools that Microsoft's making available. The public cloud, hyperscaler cloud is really a tremendous resource, and most organizations are trying to consider how they can put it to work for them. And we love to assist customers in that path they're taking.
Great. And one thing I'd like to mention also for those of you, this presentation will be available on demand, and you can still submit questions that we will forward back to Steve and Todd, even if you're watching this presentation at a later time. So we'll make sure you get those. Thank you so much, everybody. It's a great presentation.
Thank you,
Great,
Emma.
thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.